One of the last times we talked, I think you had just come back from Syria.
Yes, and
What is the situation there?
well, there's something very interesting that a new change in U.S. policy that hasn't been talked about very much because of all the
attention elsewhere. No,
distractions.
we're not talking about
Yeah.
Syria at all
Yeah.
anymore.
No.
But is the issue of the Trump administration saying they're not going to be given the CIA the green light to be working with the rebels now? And that's quite an interesting change.
Which is something that Vladimir Putin said he wanted the United States to do.
But it's also something that recognizes the reality of the situation right now, which is at this moment, Assad is not going anywhere. And that it is better to deal with the ISIS situation and then deal with Assad.
Yeah.
And it didn't make a lot of sense to be sort of halfway saying, oh, well, we're against Assad, but we really need to work with the Russians and with Assad to deal with ISIS. So I think that's an interesting new situation. On the other hand, we have some bad things, which is that Trump wants to send more troops to Afghanistan, get us deeper involved into that. And I've also been very much involved with all the civilian casualties that have been going on in Iraq with the destruction of Mosul there. And I think, unfortunately, way too little attention has been paid to the way that we've been fighting and how Donald Trump has given carte blanche to the military to not pay a lot of attention to civilian casualties. And those casualties have gone way up since he's come in.
The refugee problem in Syria continues?
Refugee problem still terrible, and especially in the neighboring countries that have such a hard time dealing with this massive, massive flood of refugees. And still the problem of the Europeans trying to deal with how they're going to deal with this flood of refugees. So the Middle East continues to be in terrible, terrible turmoil. And what we haven't seen, Bill, is what's going to happen now to take the place of the places that ISIS had been controlling. Who's going to fill that vacuum? And what is the next round of fighting that's going to come in? And so I think, we have never really dealt with the massive unrest that we helped to unleash in the Middle East. And have not.
Well, I must say, starting with Afghanistan, which is where we began, and now it's 15 years, 14, 15 years?
16 years.
16
years.
16?
16 years.
16 years.
By far the longest running war in the United States.
And Donald Trump is considering, I hasn't made that announcement yet, I guess, of sending, as you pointed out,
4,000 more troops.
Yeah,
looks like
to,
they're gonna be
to Afghanistan.
in.
So this is a Trump surge in Afghanistan. After 16,000, we put 4,000 more troops there. 16 years, 4,000 more troops there.
After all the things that Donald Trump said in his campaign about how we're not going to do this stuff and it doesn't make sense, here he is not only continuing those policies, but he's going to get us deeper involved in them.
Should we just pull out of Afghanistan?
We should just pull out of Afghanistan. We should just be pulling out of the Middle East. Our track record in the Middle East is so disastrous that people think it couldn't be worse without the United States. I mean, U.S. has been in Afghanistan all these years, and the Taliban is back. The U.S. has just created such a disaster. And, I've been doing a lot of work on U.S. Involvement with Saudi Arabia. And there you see that the U.S. is supporting the regime that is spreading this extremism. So people in the Middle East are saying, what the hell? You are selling all these weapons. These weapons end up in the hands of the extremists that are creating so many of the problems that the U.S. says it's against. And so what is this all about? And I guess, Bill, we kind of go back to where we started when we talked about Korea, which was gains from all of this? And I see it as this multi-billion-dollar weapons industry that has made so much money from all of this. And that brings me to one thing I wanted to mention, which is that we are working with other groups to finally say, we've got to just start focusing on the weapons industry and do a campaign to say, divest from the weapons industry, whether it's through your church, your city, your pension fund, your university, let's start making it something negative to be supporting a weapons industry that has kept us into wars since 9/11 now for the last 16 years with no end in sight.
And go back to the warning of President Dwight Eisenhower when he was leaving the White House about the military-industrial complex. You take that speech, it is such a powerful speech.
So powerful, so relevant to today.
Yeah.
And you can take the speeches that I just went back to yesterday to look at Pope Francis, who has said that why are we in all these wars? Could it be that it's for profit? I think so. And if we don't do something, he says, about taking on the weapons industry, then we are complicit. So all of the Catholics that are listening to your show right now should say, yes, I'm going to contact Code Pink and I'm going to work with you to do something about this out-of-control weapons industry.
She is stirring things up globally, not just here in Washington, D.C. Madea Benjamin with Code Pink. It's codepink.org. Thanks, Madea. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thanks
for coming
having
in.
me on. Good
Have
to see
fun
you.
in Cuba.
Okay.
All right.